Throughout the course of repairing these two music mites, I ran into a few issues that caused me problems here and there. Some I ran into them a month or so ago, and some maybe like last week. But anyway, I filmed some and some I haven't, so I try to make a video and try to remember all the little problems. So I'm going to slap it together, and it might be a little repetitious because I might have old footage saying some of the same stuff that I'm going to go through when I run through like a whole list. So just bear with it and enjoy it, and hopefully it will help you solve any of the problems you might have with your music mites. One of the first things I did was plug in the unit, and this amplifier went poof. There was, I think it was a resistor that kind of exploded there. Anyway, that fried, so I sent it to Jukebox Friday night, Bill Bickers, and he rebuilt this one. This one I plugged in before, and it was working fine. But I sent it to him, have him recap it and everything, and he replaced a couple tubes and replaced these caps here also on both of them. You could have just did it underneath, but it looks better if you have it the way it was. So anyway, that's the first thing I would do, is have someone recap it if you don't have the know-how to do it yourself. Second thing I did was take apart these steppers. They were all frozen with grease, just old grease in this area over here. You know, these things would not move. They're just solid. So best thing to do is just take them off, get them off if you can. You're gonna have to probably work them off, and then take a Q-tip with acetone and clean underneath here, the stem, not this brass piece, but the stem underneath, and the inside of that moving part, and basically take it all apart. Anything gummed up, use acetone to clean it, and then get everything free moving. And then you want to go through each of your switches and just manually make them open and close, and just see where they're at. You can pretty much tell what position they're supposed to be in, and just adjust them accordingly. This is a contact adjusting tool. It's great for working the contacts. They make this is the only one I really see now. I got a Pinball Resource, but I've seen that they used to make different angles of them. But this is a very good tool to have for all your contacts. One of the problems that I had was when you press a selection, just say that's number 9, and it goes around to play the record. It should be a switch that makes it, pulls this relay in and resets these switches. And the switch that does that is right over here. It's one of these two. Oops, let me back it up. Now if you look at it, let me find where I'm at here. If you look at it, you can see they are open, and when the solenoid pulls in, you can see the switches close, open, close, just like they're supposed to be doing. So when you're checking it out and you're looking, you're like, well, it looks like it's working. But the problem was, I'm assuming somewhere on the back, you got this contact fingers that spin around, and I'm assuming there must be a timing issue, because although they are closing, they weren't closing at the right time. So what was happening is the record would play, and the selection button would not reset. So the next time a record would play, it would keep playing the same record over and over. So what I did was, you had to take my contact bending tool and just close up the gap just a little bit, and that took care of that problem. So even though you do it manually and you see that it's closing correctly, you really have to get those gaps really tight for it to work properly. I'm just filming this to demonstrate a few problems I had with some contacts. This contact over here was the second one. Wasn't making, it looked like it was making, but it wasn't making all the time. Say about 9 out of 10 times, and every now and then I had this weird problem. So let me just show you this weird problem. Right over here is your selector unit, and as you see, the records are being selected. Well, actually they're just being dropped. They should be being selected. So if your records are just dropping and the selector unit isn't doing that, it's that switch there. Another problem I had with the selector
is, you see that those two switches there? We see that back one, how I have that really tight and closed. Hold on 1 second. See how that one's really tight? Well, when I had it open a little bit, it was still closing, but that one, what it does is releases these relays. Actually, hold on. I need to get this better. It's too much light. It releases this coil. There we go. And that coil, let's see if I can do this. Filming and shining the light at the same time is pretty tricky for me. Well, anyway, if the switch is made, the coil releases this, which is your button. So you know the selection was made, and if it doesn't release, you're just going to continuously play the same song over and over and over. Oh, need the light again. The other switch, right over, crap, hold on. Yeah, the other switch right over there, you can see I left a large gap in it. When I had it closer, not as tight as the other one, but when I had it just your normal, 16th or whatever, 8th, every now and then this tone arm would do like this funky double kick thing right before it's going to play its song. This relay right over here, actually it's not a relay, this coil right over here would be energized. It will release the arm, and the arm wants to go over, but it wasn't supposed to play that song, so it would kick it back, and then that coil would be pulled down again, even though it's already released, and it would play the record. And that was because of that switch over there. I have a video I made previously. I'll just throw it on right after this, so just to show it. Here's another unusual problem I've been having. It's trying to drop records, but you can see it's not dropping anything. And not just because there's no records there. You can see that the whatever these are called are not moving. The reason it's not dropping the records is when this relay pulls in, it has a spring attached to this piece, and this piece pushes against this flat black bar, and what that does is on the other side it has like a post sticking up, and that pushes it in the groove, so when the record's spinning it pops in the groove, and then that gets this going over here and it drops records. What I think is happening, I'll find out in a minute, is when this pulls in, as I was playing around with this, it's still pretty tight, but you can see there's a little play in here. This thing here keeps kicking out this way, and that's that clicking noise. It's like if you watch it on the other side, you watch the post, it's almost there and kicks out. That's the sound you're hearing, and I think it's spring tension. So I'm going to get me a different spring, and then I'll try it, and if it works, that was a problem. I thought it was this spring right over here, because when this relay pulls in, it pulls on this bar, and this bar goes against this other piece that when this is flipped over and the turntable is spinning, this piece is attached to it. I believe underneath there's a little rod that engages inside the turntable, and that creates the
records just spin. This will come over this way, get caught up in here, and that will pull those two pieces in for the record to drop. And it just kept going click, 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 because that post was not going into the underside of the turntable all the way. So you kept hearing it like just barely clipping it. And I thought it was a spring tension. So I got a spring. I don't like to mess with the original, so I got a similar spring, cut it, put it on there. I had roughly the same problem. So then I was thinking it had to be something I did today, because it was working fine yesterday, of course. And what I did was I took the wires off the tone arm when I pulled the tone arm out, and one of the wires is connected down here as a ground. So I just loosened these two screws, cocked this relay this way a little, just pushed it all the way back, and that was the problem. Just because this got a little off when I took those pieces off there. I took those screws off. So anyway, it's a simple fix, but you know, these things are very touchy. Okay, the problem ended up not being the spring. It was not where this was, although I did have that problem before, right? So this could be the problem. But the problem that I was having was, I have to find a piece through here, was where that spring connects to this silver piece. It pushes this black piece over, so when the black piece is over, that post catches up underneath the turntable, and that starts your rejecting or dropping, actually. Not your rejecting, you're dropping. What was happening is that black piece was hitting the micro switch right here. This is actually for your ejecting. And anyway, I tried to bend this when it was in position, and I must have bent it where I must have bent it down a little bit. So this was just barely clipping that, and that was stopping it from getting into the position where it could push that post up inside. And it was like almost there, and it kept like catching it but pushing it back out instead of going inside. So I just took this off here, this bracket, took the switch off and bent this down to give it some clearance. There's really hardly any clearance between there, but that was a problem. I had a few issues with the tone arm. Number one, I couldn't get the height high enough to clear the 10th record, especially if the records are warped. So this right here, this screw is your adjustment for where it drops. If it drops, I believe, too far in, then you turn it to the right and it moves it so it drops out. If it drops out, you move it to the left, and then it drops in more. So anyway, this just where the arm drops, that's what that does. But for the actual lift, is this one right here, and then this one right here also affects it. This screw here actually moves this black piece, which pushes up this post, which raises the tone arm. That's like your main one. And this screw here, there's a little round offset piece that when you turn it, it gives you just a little more height. Basically, this is the position. Well, actually, let me get the light over here. Too much. Well, you can see it here, but you can see I have a red line, actually, like right here. If this was turned to this position this way, that would be the maximum height, but I'm having problems with this rubbing on the record. So I lowered it just a little bit, but it still clears the 10th record. And what I did was I couldn't get it to clear the 10th record because this one in here seems a little weak. But I put a little piece of shrink tube on the post, and that was enough to increase it. Also, originally there was 3 washers on here, and with the 3 washers, you can't see the post here, but the post tapers at the bottom. And with the 3rd washer, the arm was up, but the taper part was being hit by this piece that pushes the arm up, and that because it's tapered, you actually lost height. So when you take the washer out, this lowers, and then this piece hits right above the tapered area. So that's the most height you can get. And like I said, if you need more, you just put a piece of shrink tube on there, and it'll give it to you. there's a screw in the back that screws basically into a cone-shaped spring that is anchored to the base on the inside of this tone arm, your weight basically. And if you screw the screw in and you pull it down, stretch it down to this clip, it's going to decrease the weight over here, which will make it lighter, so your tracking will be lighter. If you take the screw and you screw it out, that will make the spring tension less, and that'll make it heavier here. I had a hard time adjusting this thing, and some days I could have the screw halfway and it'll be working. Other times I have it all the way out and it was working, then all of a sudden it's not. A lot of trouble trying to figure this thing out. What I found was if you take this screw here and you loosen that, and then on the side you have the screw here, you have two pivot points that this tone arm sits on. There's like if you take it off, you see, here's one pivot point, this is stationary, the other one's a screw, and I think the arm was too tight. So what I did was I tightened up the screw, and then you like let the arm go. It was going down real slow, but then when it gets to the end of the record, you'll find out if it's too light, because it won't eject. It'll just keep skipping at the end, not necessarily after or while it's playing, but right when it's getting ready to eject, it gets to the end on that blank space and it won't eject. So what you could do is change the spring tension over here, so this will be heavier by unscrewing it, or sometimes I even took it off completely, and then it would work. But other times this would be too heavy and it will just like stop the record. I mean, it's that heavy. So like I said, what I ended up doing was I took the tone arm off. I had to do something, and when I put it back on and I tightened it up, I got the tone arm to actually come down like this, and I was kind of happy with that. But the only problem is it's super light and I had trouble over here. So then I just kept this little turn at a time until that tone arm kind of came down hard, and it wouldn't skip. I mean, I was just barely going until I got to the point where it wouldn't skip over here. So then I knew that was decent. Then I started messing with this spring, and I got the spring jacked almost all the way up. Now the tone arm, when it releases, it comes down nice and slow. It plays the whole record. It does not skip in the middle, does not skip at the end, and it ejects. So I don't have a scale, but I would say this thing is balanced pretty darn good. So that's how I did it. I don't know if that's the right way, but it works for me. One problem that I found really perplexing was I would make a selection, just say I play number 3. The record player would lift up the records, stack them, and then start to drop the records. Well, it would only drop one record. The turntable would still spin, and I'd just sit there and wait for the next records to drop, and they would not. This wouldn't happen all the time. It would happen just intermittently. And after a while, it started bothering me trying to figure this out. I couldn't figure it out because you went through the switches. You know, I turn the cam and I look at the switches, and they're opening and closing just like they should be. I believe the one would open and it will kill the motor. The other one would close, so the records would drop. And then you get this problem. You're like, well, what's going on? Well, anyway, to make a long story short, what was happening was as the cam was turning and the switch opened for the motor to stop, the momentum carried it a little bit beyond this point, like just like right over here. And as the switch was lifting up just a little bit on that cam, it opened up the circuit to drop the records, and of course the records wouldn't drop. So that was the problem. So again, you have to, even though you check these and you look, okay, it's opening and closing, you know, the way it should be, you got to make sure that all these things are adjusted really tight. For some reason, I decided it would be a smart idea to take off this tone arm. So I removed that screw, lifted the tone arm up, pulled everything out, but of course when I put the tone arm down, everything was out of whack. And then you have to make all your adjustments, you know, from where it lands, and your micro switch adjustments for where the record stops. Everything gets screwed up. So I advise you don't do that. If you ever have to take the tone arm off, like to change a cartridge or something, there's a screw on the other side, right over here. Unscrew that. This will pop up, and you can flip it over, do your thing, put it back on, and you won't have to worry about all them adjustments. One of the biggest pains that I found was adjusting this micro switch. This is the tone arm micro switch. This lets the arm know when it's at the end of the record. If it's adjusted improperly, it would either never eject because it never makes, or it would eject the record too soon, like in the middle of the record. And you have a little bit of a play right here, but I mean, when you're playing with this wire, if you adjust it like a 1/16 of an inch, you're talking about half a record, you know, the distance. I mean, this thing's very, very sensitive. What I found was, I drew a little picture here, that if you had it like at 90 degrees, it seems to make the switch right here. If you have it just a little beyond that, you go more towards the end. I try to get it as far to the end as I can, because some 45s are a little longer than others. But basically, when you adjust it, you put it together, and then you just take the tone arm and you just move it, and you hear click, and then you move it again, you hear click, and you just try to have it where it clicks right where you want it. Like I said, I'd say that was the most time-consuming adjustment I had to make. So if it ever gets out of whack, that's what you have to play with. And as you can see, this wire, someone was really playing with it, because this thing was twisted all over the place, but it's working good now. On the RCA record player itself, under the tone arm, there is a screw that goes into a spring. That is your tracking adjustment. So if you have the screw tightened up inside the spring, that's going to make the tone arm lighter. Only problem is, if you have the tone arm get about halfway and it starts skipping, then it's too light. Or if it gets to the end and it doesn't want to eject the record, it's too light. So you would have to back that screw out to make it a little heavier. If it's too heavy, it tends to want to stop the record, or it's going to start digging in and chewing up the record. Another important adjustment is this screw right over here, and what that does is it makes the tone arm either land more to the inside or the outside. Just if it's missing, I believe it's tone arm comes down and misses the record, I think you turn it to the left and it will go in some. And if it's starting out over here, you turn it to the right and it will back up. And then finally, the other adjustment that I use is this screw right here. And what that does is it pitches the tone arm up this way. You can see right over here, it moves this one piece here, and it makes your arm up, and that's to adjust it so it can make it across all 10 records. And also, one thing you might want to note is if your records are warped, this thing does not like to play warped records. Also, that increases the thickness of the stack, and this will not clear it. So you have to have relatively decent records. Another problem I've been having is this tone arm won't land properly. And if you turn this screw, as you're looking at it, if you turn it to the left, this tone arm will move into the right and drop more to the right. If your tone arm is going too much in the middle of the record, you would turn it to the left, no, I'm sorry, to the right, and then the tone arm will land more to the left. A little confusing. It's basically opposite. But anyway, when I was having a problem, I had to take this screw loose, get this in this position where it's locked over here, so this arm is stiff, and then I was able to push it over here a little bit and line it up and then lock it. And what I used to line it up was this one, because this one's working fine. And if you look, you can see how close this is. This arm is pretty close. My other one was out to here, so there was a good inch gap, or 3/4 inch gap, and I couldn't adjust it, where this one's really tight and you can adjust it. So that's just another adjustment problem that I had. Of course, after I moved the tone arm, now underneath the micro switch will need to be adjusted, because if you listen, hold on a second. If you listen here, there's no more clicking, so I have to adjust it so the switch makes when it should. That's the only problem when you're playing with those tone arms. One of the problems that we found, actually a very unusual problem, was every revolution that when the record was playing, you would hear like a clicking sound, and there was nothing on here that would click. So it was driving me nuts. And you'd also hear variation in the speed of the record. You'd hear just like a slight mutation of sound, whatever you want to call it. Just sounded funky. But anyway, what we figured out was the idler wheel was moving like this, and you would hear that, just a little click, and it was driving me nuts. Anyway, what we found was that this turntable must have been off at one time, and someone must have dropped it, because you see right over here, there's a flat spot. So if you can see a nice curve, comes down to here, you can see it's just a little flat in that one area, and that was enough to move that idler wheel and give you that funky clicking and that weird sound, a little bit of the warping of the sound. So anyway, what we did was I just bought another RCA unit from the same era, and I just basically junked it just so I can get this turntable. I'm going to put that on here, and that should take care of that problem. Another problem that I had with this stepper was I would play, just say for example, selection number 5, and selection number 6 would play. And if I played like number 8, number 9 would play. And the reason was when this reset itself, like right here, just say this solenoid pulled in and it reset, this section right here is supposed to land right in front of that tooth. And the problem was that it was landing right on top of the tooth. So when this solenoid pulled and you were advancing your selections, when it would go like this and push it, since this was on top of a tooth, you would actually get two teeth, or two selections. So instead of going to like number, let's just say there'll be like 1, 2, 3, because it was on top of that tooth, it would have skipped over to 4. I wish I filmed it before I showed it, but you can get a general idea. But anyway, to fix that, there was a screw underneath here. If I can go slow, you can see there's a screw back there, and all you have to do is loosen up that screw, and there's a little bracket on there, and on the back of this piece there's a stop, so it only turns so far. So you adjust that bracket, and so when this thing resets and goes against that stop, you can actually set it up so that this falls wherever you want it. So the way I have it now is where I have it falling in between the two teeth, and it works just fine. If you had another problem where just say like your fingers in the back, this is the back side of the other one, by the way, but if your fingers in the back weren't landing right, like see how this, if you look up here, this one lands in the rivet, then it lands in that rivet, and the same with all these other ones. Well, if they're not landing on the rivets right, what you have to do is you take this off, you pull the finger off, and there's 3 screws back here. You loosen those, and then you can just shift this a little until you get the, put this back on and kind of line it up until you get the rivets to line up properly, and then tighten your screws, and then tighten this back up, and that'll solve that problem.